You know those mornings where everything feels automatic? Like your body is on autopilot and you're just following some invisible script you've been living for years? That was me that day. The coffee machine was already gurgling by the time I padded into the kitchen. Light rain tapped against the window, soft and steady, the kind of sound that usually made the house feel warmer. I could smell the toast before I saw it, the faint, nutty scent drifting from the old silver toaster. It's been here longer than our marriage. It should have been peaceful. It was peaceful, but there's this thing that happens in hindsight. You start picking apart the scene, wondering if you missed something. And maybe I did. I poured 2 cups of coffee, the way I always do. One black, one with just enough milk to cloud the surface without turning it beige. Hers, I didn't even think about it. I just made it like muscle memory. And then I noticed. I hadn't seen her yet. Usually by now she'd shuffle in wearing that oversized sweater, hair a mess. Muttering something about the weather or the day ahead. Instead, the other chair sat empty. I stood there, leaning against the counter, listening to the rain and the faint hum of the fridge. I told myself she was probably still getting ready, that she might have slept in, that it was nothing but the truth. We'd been for weeks. Little things, the late nights at work. The phone she now kept face down on the table. The way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes anymore. I remember telling myself not to overthink it. People go through phases. Married life isn't a constant honeymoon. Sometimes you're just parallel, 2 tracks running side by side, but not touching. So I buttered my toast, tried to focus on the warm crunch, the comfort of routine. The smell of the coffee filled the kitchen, wrapping around me like a blanket. And yet even before I picked up my phone that day, I had this strange, heavy quiet in my chest, the kind that whispers, something's coming, you just don't know it yet. It was around 10:30 when it happened. I'd settled into my usual spot by the kitchen window, laptop open, rain still whispering against the glass. The coffee had gone lukewarm beside me, and I was half reading an email I didn't care about when my phone buzzed. I didn't think much of it. It's probably a bank notification or some useless spam. But when I glanced down, I saw her name, and then I read it. Don't call me. It's over. And the account's empty. I swear, in that moment. My brain didn't process the words in order. It was like my eyes picked up random fragments. Don't call me. Over, account empty. And for a second I thought maybe it was some kind of sick joke. But the air in the room changed. It felt colder. My fingers went numb, even though I was still gripping the phone. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, loud, uneven, like it was trying to drown out what I'd just read. I remember staring at the screen, waiting for the typing dots to appear. Some follow-up message that would say, sorry, wrong text, or I'll explain later, but nothing came. Just the dull glow of those 12 words burning into my arenas. It's strange how quickly your mind can split in two. Part of me was frozen, stuck on the absurdity she ended our marriage by text. Other part was already running ahead, cataloging questions. Where was she? When did she take the money? How much did she take? I put the phone down gently, like it might break, and sat there, staring at the coffee I'd poured for her just hours earlier. It was still sitting there, untouched, the milk swirling faintly on the surface. For a moment I actually laughed. Not a happy laugh, more like the kind of bitter, disbelieving sound that escapes when reality takes a turn you didn't even think was possible. The text was short, clinical, no explanation, no apology, no anger, just a decision, and I realized she must have sent it after everything was already done. After she'd made sure the account was drained. That was the part that sank deepest. The knowledge that this wasn't impulsive. It had been planned. I don't even remember opening the bank app. 1 second I was staring at that text. In the next, my thumb was hovering over the little blue icon, like maybe I could prove her wrong. The login felt slower than usual, each loading. Circle a taunt. And then, there it was. Balance. $0. Oh, no mistake. No pending deposit. No reassuring available balance hiding somewhere, just a blank. Empty number staring back at me. It's funny, I thought the shock of the text was bad. But seeing that 0, that's when my stomach really dropped. That's when the air felt heavier, like the walls themselves were leaning in. I closed my eyes. And for some reason, I saw her sitting across from me at the kitchen table 2 weeks ago. We'd been having one of those casual late-night talks. She'd been in her pajamas, hair tied up, sipping tea. "I think we should be a little smarter with our spending this month," she'd said, in that calm, almost playful tone. "Maybe. Hold off on big purchases." At the time, I nodded. I even felt proud of us. Like, yeah, we're being responsible adults. But now, I replayed that moment and heard the spaces between her words. Was she already thinking about pulling everything out? Was she already counting down the days until she'd leave? The thought made my skin crawl. I scrolled through the transaction history, my eyes darting like I was chasing a confession in the numbers. The withdrawals were methodical, spread out just enough so they didn't trigger alerts. She'd been careful, strategic. It wasn't just the money she took. It was the trust, the quiet belief that, no matter what, we were on the same side. Now I couldn't stop asking myself the same question. Was our marriage even real at the end? Or was it just her waiting for the right moment to cash out? Cursor on my laptop blinked in the dimming light, the rain outside now just a whisper. I sat there, frozen, watching the last pieces of our shared life vanish into the past tense. Once you know the ending, it's impossible not to rewatch the whole story in your head. Only now. Every scene feels different, darker. I started thinking about the little things I'd brushed off, like the late nights she said she was at work. She'd come home smelling faintly of perfume, not hers, and her explanation was always some vague joke about office politics or the boss keeping me late. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. Or the phone. God, the phone. Always face down on the table. Screen lighting up with messages she'd glance at but never open in front of me. Once, I caught a glimpse, just her smiling, thumbs moving quickly, and when I asked, she laughed. It off, just a friend sending me something stupid. Then there was that night she sat on the couch giggling at her phone. I remember leaning in, curious, and she pulled it closer to her chest, like a kid hiding a secret drawing. "It's nothing," she'd said, still smiling to herself. Back then, I told myself I was overreacting. Now I can hear that laughter in my head, and it's like a splinter under my skin. It's strange how your brain can take warm memories and freeze them solid. The lighting in my mind's eye even shifts. What was once golden and soft now feels pale, cold, drained of color. I keep replaying one scene in particular. We were in bed. The lights low, and she rolled over to face the wall. I asked if everything was okay. She paused. "Yeah, just tired." That pause. It's louder now. It feels loaded. I wish I could say I was angry right away, but I wasn't. The first feeling was sadness. Sadness that I didn't see it sooner. Sadness that maybe for months I'd been living next to someone who'd already decided to leave. The anger came after. Slow. A simmer under the ribs. The first instinct was primal. Grab the phone. Hit call. Demand an explanation loud enough to rattle her through the speaker. I even picked it up. My thumb hovered over her name, and then I stopped, because I knew exactly how that conversation would go. She'd dodge. She'd twist. She'd sprinkle just enough truth to keep me hooked, and I'd end up pacing the kitchen, heart pounding, saying things I'd regret. I realized if I called her, I'd be playing on her terms. She'd control the pace, the tone, the version of the story I got, and the last thing I wanted was to hand her the steering wheel when she'd already driven us into a ditch. So instead, I set the phone down, screen face down, like it had become a loaded weapon, and just breathed. Outside. The rain was heavier now, streaking the glass, pooling at the edge of the patio. I stood there watching it, letting the sound drown out the noise in my head. That's when the shift happened. When my focus slid away from her and onto me. Because the truth is, and she didn't know this yet, I'd already made my own move. Weeks ago, not out of suspicion, not even out of malice, just a quiet, cautious step I'd taken to protect myself, after a late-night talk with someone I trusted. A step I now realized was going to change everything about how this ended. I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet. But there was a strange calm in knowing she thought she'd won, that she believed she'd taken everything. In reality, she hadn't even scratched the surface. A few months back, long before that text. Before the zero-balance gut punch, I'd had a conversation I didn't think much of at the time. It was with an old friend, the kind of guy who's been through a divorce and wears it like a scar. We were sitting in this quiet corner of a coffee shop, steam curling off our cups, when he leaned in and said, "Look, I'm not saying anything's wrong, but you should always have a backup plan, just in case." I laughed it off at first. I told him I trusted my wife. We didn't keep secrets from each other. He just nodded like he'd heard it all before. "Sure," he said. "What?" "But trust doesn't pay the bills when things go south. The thing is," his words stuck with me. Not in a paranoid way, more like a pebble in my shoe. Small, irritating, impossible to ignore. So, one rainy afternoon, a lot like the one when she texted me, I sat at my desk and made a few quiet arrangements. A separate account. Some paperwork. Couple of transfers that looked ordinary enough to anyone not paying close attention. I didn't think I'd ever need it. Honestly, it felt almost silly, like buying an umbrella for a drought. But there was something oddly comforting about locking those details away. I can still remember sliding the signed forms into the bottom drawer of my desk, the one with the stiff handle, closing it with a click, turning the tiny key and tucking it into the back of my wallet. It wasn't a betrayal. It wasn't revenge. Back then, it was just insurance. Now, sitting in that kitchen with the rain pounding harder against the glass, I realized it was the smartest move I'd ever made. She thought she'd taken everything but the truth. She'd only taken what I'd let her find. It was almost 3 weeks before I heard anything from her again. Not a call, not a text. It's just silence, like she'd vanished into whatever life she'd traded ours for. Then one morning, I got a notification from the lawyer's office. The message was short: document sent. She's been notified. I knew exactly what that meant. Somewhere across town, maybe still in her new apartment, maybe at a friend's place. She'd opened an envelope with her name printed in bold letters. Inside were neatly typed pages explaining, in the clearest, coldest legal language, that the real money, the kind she could have lived off for years, was never in the account she drained. That it had been moved long before she made her exit. I pictured her reading those words. The slow shift in her expression. First confusion, then the realization. Then maybe that small flare of panic you feel when the game you thought you'd already won suddenly flips against you. I didn't feel joy exactly, but there was a deep, grounding satisfaction in knowing she'd have to sit with the truth that I wasn't as naive as she'd believed. She'd taken the obvious pile. The one I'd left in plain sight like a decoy. What she didn't know was that I'd spent years building something more secure, more invisible. And now, thanks to that rainy afternoon months ago, it was untouchable. The power shift was almost physical. For weeks, she'd been the one holding the secret, moving the pieces. Now, I was the one with the quiet upper hand. I poured myself a coffee and sat at the same kitchen table where she used to sit. Outside, the sun was breaking through the clouds for the first time in days, and I realized I didn't need to say a word to her. The letter had done it for me. It started with one call. Her name lit up my phone for the first time since that text. I let it ring until it went silent. Then came the second call. The third, string of them, each one stacking on top of the other. Like she thought persistence could break me. I didn't answer any of them. By the end of the day, the calls turned into messages. First, short and sharp, call me back. Then longer, angrier. Demands for explanations, accusations that I'd set her up, even half-hearted attempts at guilt. I read them all in silence. Thumb hovering over the reply button, then sliding the phone face down onto the table. There's a strange kind of power in saying nothing. In knowing that whatever words you might throw back would only keep the threat alive. Give them an audience. I didn't know her that. Not anymore. I thought about the old version of me. The one who would have fired back instantly, who would have chased her down for answers I thought I deserved. That man was gone now. I understood something I should have learned years ago. Sometimes the loudest thing you can say is nothing at all. Outside, the rain had stopped. The air was still, heavy with that damp post-storm smell. I stood by the window watching a single drop slide down the glass, tracing a slow, uneven path until it disappeared. Her words might have filled the screen, but in my world they barely registered anymore. The conversation she was trying to have wasn't mine to join. The days after her last message felt empty at first. Not the kind of empty that's peaceful, the kind that's almost too quiet. Like the world is holding its breath. I'd wake up and the house felt bigger than it used to. Not in a good way, just hollow. Her shoes weren't by the door anymore. Her jacket wasn't hanging on the hook. The small, ordinary mess that used to fill the corners of our life together was gone. For a while I thought that emptiness was something I had to fight. But slowly I realized it was space. Space I could use to rebuild. It started small. I went for a run one morning, to see if I could still handle the trail behind our neighborhood. My legs burned, but the air felt cleaner in my lungs than it had in months. I called an old friend I hadn't spoken to in years, and we laughed over stupid things like nothing had changed. Even the kitchen felt different. I moved the table closer to the window, so the light hit it just right in the mornings. I started cooking for myself, not just reheating leftovers, but real meals. Simple, but mine. Every now and then, a memory would sneak in, like the day we went hiking and she slipped in the mud and we laughed until our sides hurt. Or the way she used to hum while brushing her teeth. I didn't push those memories away. I let them pass through. They were part of my life, but they didn't own me anymore. One night, I opened the drawer where I'd kept an old photo of us, the one from our first trip together. For a second, I thought about throwing it out. Instead, I put it in a box and slid it onto a shelf in the closet. Not because I wanted to keep her, but because I was done letting her dictate what stayed and what went. Some things you don't destroy. You just put them somewhere out of sight and let time do the rest. A few nights ago, I found myself drafting a message to her. I don't even know why I started. Maybe it was boredom. Maybe it was that stubborn human urge to have the last word. It wasn't long, just one clean sentence, the kind that cuts without raising its voice. It said exactly what I thought of her, of what she'd done, and of how little power she had left over me. I read it twice. I'm hovering over the send button. Then I deleted it. Because here's the truth. Sending it would have been for her, not me. It would have been one last thread tying me back to her world, giving her the satisfaction of knowing she was still on my mind. And, done giving her that, I closed the phone and set it face down. On the table, the room was quiet, but it wasn't the old kind of quiet, not the hollow silence she left behind. This was lighter, like the air had shifted. Outside, the streetlights were casting long shadows across the pavement, and the night smelled faintly of rain. I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside, locking the door behind me. I didn't have a destination. I just walked past the houses, past the corners I knew by heart. And with every step, the weight on my chest felt a little less. Some stories don't end with fireworks or big confrontations. Some just fade. And when they do, you realize the real closure isn't something you get from the other person. It's the moment you stop needing them to give it to you. So no. That last line, but I know it, and that's enough.